Babies end up in the NICU for a lot of different reasons. Very often it's prematurity, so a baby born before 37 weeks gestation, or they need a little help adjusting to life. But sometimes, and actually quite often, babies have something going on with them that's congenital, so something that they're born with that makes it so that life outside of their mother's womb is impossible. One of those babies, mothers, is here joining me today, Adriane Rodriguez, who is just a real pleasure and has become an amazing friend to me. She's one of our NICU mentors with ICU Baby and has supported hundreds of families herself. But beyond that, she is the loving mother of two children, wife to her beautiful husband, and she's also a registered dietitian prior to even having children. So she knows a lot about nutrition and what's healthy diets for pregnant women and lactating mothers. And then she went on just recently to get her to become a certified lactation consultant as well. So she's really morphing all of these skills together around what we do a lot in the NICU, which is feeding mothers, feeding babies, and making sure that everybody in the family is well. Today, she's here to join me to talk about her daughter, Viviana, and her experience with her in the NICU. Welcome, Adriane.
Hi, Leah. Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yes, so glad to have you.
Thank you.
So catch us up with what brought Viviana to the NICU.
Okay, well, our journey to the NICU was a little bit different. Like you said, a lot of babies that we see in the NICU are premature. And they have to come to the NICU because they're just simply too little to live outside their mom's womb. But that was not Vivi's story. Our journey to the NICU actually began much, much earlier than when we actually set foot there. When I was 18 weeks pregnant with Vivi, I'll never forget. We celebrated Mother's Day and I had taken a picture and I was like, oh, look at this cute little bump. And I was so happy. And, we already had our son, we had a little boy and we were having our little girl. We had already done the genetic testing at 10 weeks. It was all good. We were like, woohoo, and we found out she was a girl. So we knew that. So we were like, yay, everything's fine, I stopped worrying after that. I already had a healthy baby boy. The genetic testing was good. I was like, okay, we don't have anything to worry about. I had an easy pregnancy the first time, a normal labor and delivery. And I was like, okay, we got this. The very next day, I went in for our anatomy scan. And I'm still not really clear if this is something that they do for all mothers now or because I was advanced maternal age. I was an older mom.
What does older mom mean?
Not too old. At the time, I was 37. And so I was categorized. So, but I had that with my son too. So, and it was just a routine screening, an anatomy screen. They were just going to do an ultrasound. They were going to check everything, say, we see her heart, we see her lungs, all that stuff. I had done it before. No big deal. So that's the next day, Monday, the day after Mother's Day. And I go in and we're doing the scan and she's checking everything. And she's like, oh, I see this. This looks good. Whatever. And looking back on it now, I remember they actually didn't say anything about her lungs. So I didn't think anything of it at the time, but now looking back and I was like, oh, it all makes sense. So she finishes up, she sends me to the waiting room and I'm waiting and I'm like, okay, why am I waiting so long? She didn't mention anything in the ultrasound, why am I still sitting here? And then somebody opens the door and they're like, you need to come see the doctor. And I was like, why? Why do I need to go see the doctor, the maternal fetal medicine specialist?
Right.
So I go in, I sit down, he's behind his desk and he's very somber, not a friendly. It wasn't a nice environment for me. I walked in and I was already anxious about it. And he's like, your daughter has a huge tumor on her lung. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? You know, he's like, yes, it's something we call blah, 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 blah. He started to talk about it. And I'm like in shock already. I can't hear anything else. And I'm by myself. My husband didn't even come with me because we're like, oh, she's fine. We already knew she was a girl. I'm like, and they're done that. So I'm just sitting there now in front of this guy. And the next thing he says to me is, I need to let you know that in Florida, at 18 weeks is when your baby is beyond 18 weeks, you can no longer terminate your pregnancy. And I'm like, I'm sorry, what? He's like, yes, if you want to terminate this pregnancy, you have to decide basically now. And I'm like terminate my pregnancy. I'm like, I was just, it was too much. And
you were there for a heartbeat.
A heartbeat.
In like measuring how big her hands are.
And then he's like, do you want to end your pregnancy? And I'm like, I couldn't even wrap my head around it. And prior to that, he was like, she has this, and there's a chance that she'll be fine. And I'm like, okay, so I'm like, you just told me there's a chance, right? You said there's a chance that my daughter will be fine and that she'll live a normal life and that she'll be okay. And he's like, yeah, there's a chance. I said, okay, that's all I need to know. That's all I need to know. I said, there's no other option for me. So that's what we're doing. So I said, thank you very much. I went home. I told my husband, and, my husband immediately, he starts working. He's like, okay, what are we going to do? He's like, basically what it was is she was diagnosed with something that they call CPAM. It's a congenital cystic adenomatoid malformation, basically a huge mass of unviable lung tissue. It's just like a big mass of tissue where her left lower lung lobe was supposed to be. And already at 18 weeks, it was big. It was already big, and they could see it. I could see it, and I'm not sure. I'm not trained. So already that was the concern that he had, the fact that, a lot of babies, it's not, it's not super common. I mean, it's common enough, most babies that if they have it, they're small, and a lot of times they don't even notice them. But hers was already so big, it was already starting to kind of push things, push her heart a little bit. And so that's why he was so concerned. So immediately my husband starts researching. He's like, okay, what are we going to do? We're not ending this pregnancy. We're going all in. We're doing whatever it takes, no matter what we need to do. We are, going to fight for our little girl. And, I mentioned to you earlier, we had a list of names, for our daughter. And one of them was Viviana. And so immediately I was like, that's her name. She's going to be Viviana because she's going to be alive. She's going to live. So that's it. So from that moment forward, we went all in. Because of this diagnosis,
you told me before. So Viviana, I didn't know this, but Viviana means life.
Means life. Yeah. It means alive. It means full of life. So from that moment, I was just like, that's her. She's alive. And she's going to be alive. She's going to be fine. And we're going to meet her, and we're going to do whatever it takes. So yeah, my little Vivi. So, anyway, like I said, the mass was really big. And so we knew that, she definitely had a tough road ahead of her. We all did. We knew that this particular type of lung mass, that it continued based on history. Doctors know it. That it keeps growing. Basically, it doesn't stop growing, and some of them grow very quickly. Some of them grow very slowly. Some of them will stop at a certain, I can't remember when, but it's like 30 or 32 weeks or something. Like some of them will stop growing, but they do continue to grow particularly quickly in those, right where I was, 18 weeks to like 28 weeks, like for those 10 weeks. So the next thing we did is we made an appointment at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia with their maternal fetal medicine team. And because we needed we wanted to help her and do whatever we could. And
but you're here, just for reference, for those
in Miami.
You're in Miami, Florida,
which is an amazing place to have a baby.
Sure,
the medical care here is phenomenal. There's teaching hospitals here, and they, maybe could have managed it here, but we really wanted her to go to the place where they were really experts in this particular diagnosis.
And that's what all that research was that your husband was doing and sort of finding out, and what should we do about that?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what he does, what's the best thing to do. So
Okay.
best for her, hard for the rest of us. Because so what ended up happening is I went there and they worked me up and they were like, yes, this is a really significant CPAM. They call it CPAM now, like the Congenital Pulmonary Airway Malformation. But at any rate, it was a significant tumor already. And they know, because they see a lot of babies with this condition, they know what happens. They know it continues to grow. They know you need to be monitored very closely. So that started our path to the NICU. I also have a son already.
Right.
So an 18-month-old, wild, fun, full of life little boy who has now, in this with us, and we have to figure that out too. So,
Yeah.
Without disrupting his life too much, because,
Sure.
he's too young. He doesn't understand what's going on. He doesn't know why mommy's crying and why dad's, a nervous wreck. And, he doesn't know why we're flying to Philadelphia. And then we moved to my mom's house. We moved to New York because the recommendation from the Children's Hospital Philadelphia, CHOP, was that I be monitored with ultrasounds every week from then on, sometimes twice a week. So the only way to do that was to move closer. Right. I couldn't move to Philadelphia. We didn't know anybody there. Staying in a hotel is hundreds of dollars a night. Right. That wasn't really an option. So we moved to my mom's house in New York, which was a short 5-hour drive to Philadelphia.
Yeah.
And that's what we did. My son and I, we packed up and we lived out of suitcases, and my mom drove me. She's amazing. Like, my husband had to work. He couldn't come. So my husband stayed alone here in Miami. He sent his pregnant wife with a daughter with a serious medical complication, and his son off to his mother-in-law's. And that's what we did for 5 months. 5 months. Yeah, pretty much.
Okay. And so at 5 months now, how far along are you in your pregnancy at that point?
So we did the back and forth. We went to CHOP. I had ultrasounds. It was super stressful because her tumor kept growing. I wasn't one of the lucky ones whose, Vivi, it just kept getting bigger and bigger. At one point, it got so big that she could no longer swallow amniotic fluid. It was compressing. The tumor was pushing her heart, displaced to the right side of her body. It was pushing on her esophagus, and she was no longer swallowing enough amniotic fluid. So if you saw me, I looked like I was either carrying triplets or, twins or triplets. I was sick when I was 6 months pregnant, or, ready to pop. I was huge because
Did they ever ask you, because you look ready and that she wasn't swallowing, was there ever a conversation about, hey, we might need to take her now?
Yes. That conversation happened. So one of the things that you can do, there's a couple treatment options when that starts to happen. Fortunately, both Vivi and I were both doing okay. Neither of us were in distress. By some miracle, I don't know, because they could have fetal hydrops. The baby can go into distress, or fetal demise. She could die from this. But fortunately, she was still doing okay. So a couple of the options were, one was to perform fetal surgery, where they would basically open me up. I think essentially they remove her while she's still attached to the umbilical cord, resect the tumor, stitch her back up, and then put her back inside me, which my husband was like, we're not doing that. He was like, there's just no way. He's like that. And he's like, I'm not losing you and her. And it just didn't seem like a viable option. And we didn't agree on that. I was like, I'm doing whatever it takes, this is my daughter, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to help her. I'm her mom already, I haven't met her, but she's my baby. And, that was the only option. Fortunately for us, it didn't come to that. They were able to offer us another alternative, steroid shots, for me. And what the steroids would do was just slow down the growth of the tumor enough for her to kind of, continue to grow, to get bigger, so that the tumor stays small, stays that size, but she grows. So it doesn't take up as much space within her, chest cavity. And so I had two rounds of steroids, and it worked, it worked by some miracle. It was still a large size tumor, but it allowed her to continue to grow, with inside of me. And, we didn't have to do any other, anything else, yet.
Okay.
So
we still going back and forth.
Yeah. Still all going back and forth, back and forth. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And by the time you had this procedure, where does that bring you to?
So I had the steroids, and then I would go back to my mom's, and then, then we would go back and they would measure. As every time I went to the doctor, every time I went in, they would measure the tumor. So there she would be up on the screen on the ultrasound, and they're measuring all these things. And it's just like, it's so anxiety producing, because I'm like, oh my gosh, is this going to be the time where they say it's too big, or is this going to be the time where they're like, oh, it's not growing, So like every time I'm like, it's so stressful, it's awful. And every time I walked in that place, I was just like a nervous wreck, I was just like, what are they going to tell me today? What's going on inside of my body? Like, I can't see it. I don't know. They're going to pull up the screen and start doing these measurements, and you're watching it, trying to figure it out. Like, oh, okay, is it smaller? Is it bigger? What was it last time? Like trying to piece the puzzle together. And yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot. So I got to be, I think maybe 34 weeks, which was amazing.
Okay. That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. And at that point they were like, okay, she can't be, she has to be delivered via C-section, because with a tumor this size, there's a good chance she's not going to be able to breathe when she's born, or that she won't be able to go through the stress of labor. So at that point, they're like, you need to move here. You can't keep going back and forth. You can't stay with your mom, 5 hours away. You need to come to Philadelphia. And I'm like, oh my God, okay, what am I going to do in Philadelphia? I started looking up the hotels, and I'm like, $500 a night, for an unknown amount of time. It could be months, because I knew she was going to be born with, if she was born alive, she was going to have a serious medical issue. She was going to either require immediate surgery, or it was going to be surgery soon thereafter. So we knew we were going to be there for a while,
Right.
So thankfully, we were able to move into the Ronald McDonald House, which they have one here in Miami. And, I think I thought one way about it before I went there. And it is a godsend, a lifesaver. It's amazing for a family that needs to be by their baby's bedside, or, for an unknown amount of time. It was the greatest blessing that I could have ever hoped for. It's a wonderful place. And we lived there. I lived there with my son, my toddler, and my mom, because the other thing is I couldn't be alone, because they're like, you basically need a babysitter, because you can't be on your own.
Right.
Because if you go into labor, we need you to immediately be, they didn't know what was going to happen. So, I had my babysitter, my mom, and my son. And we moved into the Ronald McDonald House. So the place is amazing.
And that's right there on the campus of...
It's a little farther away than, we have here in Miami. We had to still drive, but it was very close, and it's free. It's you don't have to pay to be there, and they feed you, and you have a room, and, there's a big meeting area where people get together and they bring people in. And my son has a little playground, and there's toys, and we celebrated his second birthday there. And, as a mom, I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do for my baby's birthday? And they threw him a birthday party. a birthday party. They gave him presents, and all the other families and other kids that were there with us, they all came to his party. And it was like, it was amazing. Yeah. To this day, we still, we send, something to them every year, because what they did for my family is, you can't, it can't be replaced. It was amazing.
Yeah.
So we were there, and it's funny enough because I mentioned that, I had this condition, polyhydramnios, which is basically having an excessive amount of fluid in your uterus. By the time I got to the end of my pregnancy, because I was able to keep Vivi somehow, I didn't go into labor, and she stayed. She did her part. She hung on. She's a fighter from the minute she was conceived. This girl, she was like, I'm coming. I'm full of life, and I am going to be here, and I'm going to prove to this whole world, that I'm meant to be. So I went in for an ultrasound, and they were like, you don't have any amniotic fluid left. It was gone.
This was at the end of the pregnancy?
At the end. I actually looked less pregnant when I was 40 weeks than I did when I was like 6 months pregnant, 7 months pregnant.
All the fluid had come down.
I guess she was able to swallow it, and she took care of it. So they actually had to bring, immediately they were like, you need to go for C-section now, which I felt good about, because already I had to pick the day, and I was like, that's a little weird. Like they're calling me like, what day do you want to have your baby? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm not God. I didn't want to do it. So I ended up, I didn't, she picked her day. So on October 8th, sorry, I know I'm definitely rambling, but on October 8th, they scheduled me for C-section, and I was terrified, right? Because
of course.
She's been safe, here with me. I've been, she's breathing, she's alive
in your belly.
And in my belly. And when she comes out, we have no idea what's going to happen.
What had they told you about what was going to happen?
So what they told me is her tumor is so big that most likely when she's born, pretty much like guaranteed me that when she's born, she will not be able to breathe. Her tumor is going to have taken up so much space, and it was her right upper lobe. It was her left lower lobe that was basically just a huge mass of non-viable lung tissue, but it had compressed the right upper lobe as well. So that lung was not really developed at all. And it was pushing on the other ones on the other side too. So it was the left side. It was all on the left side. And on the right side, it looked like normal lung tissue, but they just didn't know. They didn't know if she would have enough viable lung tissue to survive on her own without immediate intervention. So what they do at CHOP, one of the really cool things about this hospital is they have something called the SDU, the Special Delivery Unit. And basically, you go in as a mom into your operating room for your surgery, your C-section. And right next door, they have set up the whole team of surgeons waiting to operate on, at these teaching hospitals, these big, they have all kinds of things going on there all the time. The CPAM that my daughter had is just one of the many, 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 complications that they're seeing on a daily basis. So they have her team there. And I joke around now, it wasn't at all funny at the time. It was terrifying. But that, they were basically just going to take her out and then pass her through a window, there you go, here she is. And immediately she was going to have surgery, and they were going to resect the lung, and then she would hopefully survive that and then go into the NICU. Finally, after how many months? Let's see, this is about 5 months, after we found this out, that she was being born, and then she would go to the NICU. But my Vivi, the force that she is, that's what my mom calls her, the force. When she was born, she not only could breathe, she cried at the top of her lungs. They took her out of they removed her, and she's, and I was like, is she crying? She's crying, she's breathing, she's breathing, she's alive, And everybody, my husband, everyone was like nobody could believe it because this mass was so big. They were for sure certain that she wasn't gonna breathe at all. But she did. She did. She was able to breathe.
And they brought her over to the other.
They didn't. So what happened was she did need a little bit of nasal cannula because she didn't have enough a healthy lung, to, maintain her own oxygen levels. So they put a nasal cannula on her and they said, we quick change plans. What they decided to do was to take her to the NICU. So she, started her NICU journey, and they said, we'll wait 2 days. We're going to wait 2 days. We're going to give her 2 days to kind of just, acclimate to being out here. We're going to see how she does. And then because sometimes babies with CPAMs, they'll let them wait a couple months if they're not too big, but they knew hers was so big. They were like, she's never going to be able, she'll just be on oxygen for all those months. Like she'll never be able to breathe on her own. We're going to have to take this out anyway. So let's just do it. So on her second day, 2 days old, she looked like she had her little rib stuck out a little because the tumor was so big. It was pushing out her abdomen. But beyond that, she looked great. She looked like a healthy little girl. And, so we got to see her. I didn't get to hold her because they rushed her, right to the NICU, just to start, everything they had to do to get her ready for surgery, stabilize her, all those things. So when she was 2 days old, they brought us down to the room that she was in, kind of like the pre-op or whatever. And, we had to say goodbye, but, maybe because she's a very sick little girl going in for a very significant surgery at 2 days old. And, there was no guarantee that she was going to survive. In my heart, deep inside of me, I just really felt like she would. I mean, I say that now because she did, but even at the time, I was terrified. I have never been so scared in my life, sending my little girl off to 6 hours. 6-hour surgeries, but they said it would take about 6 hours to resect the enormous tumor that she had. And oh my God, it was the longest 6 hours of my life. And I know other NICU moms have, now that I'm in the NICU a lot, I know other families, when they have to do this, it's excruciating. And you go, you say goodbye, you give them a little hug and kiss, and then they leave, and you just pray and you hope that, that your baby's gonna come back. And then for 6 hours, you wait. You just wait.
Yeah. Let's talk about that waiting.
Oh my God. But
where were you waiting?
Well, I have my son who has no idea. I mean, he has a little bit of an idea, but he's 2. He just turned 2. He's like, Mommy, when are we going to the playground? And he needs to eat and he needs someone to play with him. And he wants to go see, they have this really cool, enormous, marble run thing downstairs. And he said, Mommy, come see this. And, in some ways it was a nice distraction to be able to kind of pour into him and yep. Just not think about, not just sit there for 6 hours, in anxiety and panic. I kind of stepped out. For me, being outside is really helpful. I like to get out. Nature. Yeah. The sun for me, here in Florida, sometimes it can be a little much, but, there, is to step outside of the unit. By then I was discharged from the hospital. So I was no longer, I had to stay for a couple of days, but by then I was living again in the Ronald McDonald House. So, to go outside, to take him outside, to walk, and to just kind of disconnect from it all just for a little bit. I was very lucky that my mom was with me too. And, she helped me a lot, just with him and, just having your mom with you when you're when you're going through stuff is just amazing. So yeah, it was the longest 6 hours of my life. And then when I finally saw Vivi again, like she made it through the surgery, which was obviously the first, there's been many miracles up until now, because there were many times where, we could have lost her, but she made it through the surgery, which was huge. That was a huge thing for her to survive that. Now we have to recover. She's got to recover. She comes back from surgery and I've never seen so many things coming out of a little baby. There's both her arms, wires, tubes. She's intubated now. So she's got the breathing tube in. They had put a feeding tube in, even though she couldn't feed yet. She's got like literally like every part of her body is covered with something. And she's also full of fluid. So she looks like swollen. Like it doesn't even look like the same baby that I saw 6 hours. So it was hard to see, and you worry like, oh, is she hurt? Is she suffering? And is she going to be okay? And then now she has a chest tube in, and it's like, so they're like, you can't hold her for as long as she has the chest tube in. And obviously she was very critical, but like, basically they're like, as long as she has that chest tube in, like you can't hold your baby. I'm like, okay, well, we'll worry about that then. But yeah, it was hard to see her like that after.
What did you do when they were like, listen, you can't hold her? And I know you're obviously very connected with your babies and your children. And
oh yeah,
what were some things that helped you to get through that time before you were able to hold her again? Are there things that you did with her?
Yeah. So, fortunately, well, at first I couldn't do much because she was just so critical. I didn't even want to touch her because I was so scared of introducing anything into her, very fragile situation that could like, an infection or just, accidentally hitting a wire or, anything like that. But she, babies are amazing. And she, within a couple of days, she was doing a lot better, and they were able to extubate her. So during that time when she was very critical, I didn't do much. I was there, I was by her bedside, and, I would talk to her, and I'm not a great singer, so I wasn't singing to her, but my kids will still tell you to this day, Mom, stop singing. But, I talked to her and I just, told her I loved her and I was there for her. But as soon as I was able to participate in, like helping to change her diaper, once she became like stable enough that I could do stuff, I did. They started, she had a feeding tube, but pretty quickly, because she was a full-term baby, she didn't have some of the hurdles or the milestones to hit that some of our other NICU babies do. Like, she was old enough, once she medically was medically stable, and once they took off, once they extubated her and she was breathing, well, she was on the nasal cannula, so she was still being supported, but she was able to start feeding. So they started, I could feed her. I couldn't breastfeed her, which is what I really wanted to do. I had nursed my son, and that was really important to me. I really wanted to do that. But I was pumping. That's a whole other thing. Pumping is a lot. It's hard.
We'll do a whole nother episode on
it. I know. That's a whole other thing. Recovering from surgery and pumping and getting up every 3 hours. It's a lot. But, I had milk for her. Not much. I didn't make a lot of milk, but I had some. And so what I did is I fed her. I got to bottle feed her. And actually, my husband did it first, and he sends me a picture because we what we did is we kind of took shifts, right? Because we have a toddler, and I'm pumping, and so we're going at different times. So he would go in the morning first, and he got there one morning, and they were like, "You could feed her." So he's like, okay. So he gets the bottle and he feeds her, and he takes a picture and he sends it to me. I said, "This is the cutest picture ever," because she's like, so surprised, like, what is this? It's the cutest thing with these big eyes. So that's what we did. We couldn't hold her, but we fed her and from the bottle because that's the way that she was eating. But it was awesome. And then, she was working with her pacifier. So I would help her, hold her pacifier because she would, drop out of her mouth and then, so we would do that, change her diaper, mostly things like that. That's how we bonded initially. But yeah, that's hard. It's hard. It's very hard when you just want so badly to like to hold your baby and you can't. And that's definitely something that, as NICU parents, NICU moms, that's a really hard thing. And the other thing, when you have to leave the hospital every day and you don't leave with your baby, leaving your baby behind, it's really, really hard to walk out that door. Where we were, they didn't have, it was kind of a ward similar to what we have at Holtz. You don't have your own room. You have a chair, which isn't definitely not comfortable enough to spend the night in. So, we did leave her, the NICU nurses are amazing. And we got to know some of them really well, and they took really good care of her. And so, we would leave without her for a few weeks, and it was pretty excruciating. But she pretty quickly, after she got through the initial really tough time, she progressed pretty well. The biggest thing that held us up, I would say, is the chest tube. They had to, after you do any type of surgery in the heart or the lungs, like the pleural area. I'm probably not saying that right, but something to that effect. Any type of heart lung surgery, they put in a chest tube because they need to drain all the stuff that's in there. There's fluid that builds up, blood, even air. So they put the chest tube in to just keep that area, keep that all flowing so that they don't get an infection. So she had this chest tube in, and that was really what for us, it wasn't necessarily like a setback per se, but it was what, really was like holding us up. So like every day they were looking at the little drain, and it's still draining, and kept draining. And once that started to taper off, then it was like, oh, but there's air. We're looking at her, I don't remember, it's a CT scan or a chest x-ray, but they would look at the images, and they're like, no, we still see air, we can't take it out. And I'm like, can't hold your baby, still see. So that's
so these like are huge setbacks, right? When you're like moving forward, how did you handle those things, right? Like you're like, okay, it's done. What about now? How do you hold yourself up?
Well, it's hard because then you start to think like, well, is it ever going to stop? Like you just start like, is she ever going to not have air in her lung? Or like, is it ever going to stop bleeding? And then you just start to kind of think like, it's never going to get better, which, because it's not. And like, you come in each day with this hope of like, oh, today's the day, and then they're like, oh no, sorry. And you're like, oh, kind of takes the wind out of your sails a little when you're there, and you're, especially like, I guess when you're just waiting for like this one thing, and I know a lot of our preemie moms, it's feeding with them, they're waiting for the baby to eat enough. It's like almost like, the NICU experience is almost like there is like each baby has kind of like their one thing that oh, and you can just do that one thing, then you can go home. And so, for us, our one thing was, this chest tube that just kept, or this chest, this air, I guess, that was, kind of in her lung. And then it was the craziest thing because they're talking all about this. And then I come in the next day and they're like, they say this. And then like a couple hours later, they come and they pull it out. And they're like, you can hold the baby and she's going home today. And I was like, wait, what? Because like, you just told me this morning. And I was like, oh my God. Like, I mean, I was ecstatic.
So sudden.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. It was like from one minute to the next, everything changed. So it's amazing. I'm so excited. I'm so happy, but I'm like, but wait, what about the air? Like,
right. You're so worried about this.
Like, are you sure? Like, really? You're going to let her come home with me? Like, she's hooked up to all these things. And all of a sudden she's not. And they're like, okay, you can take her home now. And I'm like, it's super stressful.
So what do you think went on there, Adriane? What do you think would have been helpful? Like, it sounds to me like there was a lot of probably some thought process that they didn't let you know about, maybe. What do you think?
Yeah, exactly. Definitely medical things going on that maybe they just didn't share with me. I know my husband was pretty in touch with the medical team, but he even was like, what? Like surprised. And yeah, I would have had liked a little bit more warning, because it was all of a sudden like, well, where am I going to take her?
Right.
I didn't want to take her to the Ronald McDonald House because there's too many people
Right.
there, and she's still a fragile little baby.
Yeah.
And I don't want her to be around a million people that, there's little kids, like people that are sick. And I'm like, and not to mention, I didn't have a place for her to sleep.
Right. This is not your home.
I don't
Right.
have a crib. Yeah. I'm like, where do you want me to, like, what do you want me to do with this baby? Like, here, take the baby. I'm like, I don't live here. I don't have a crib. I don't have I don't have anything. And you gave me no warning. So I was like, oh my gosh. Like, on one hand, obviously thrilled because I can hold my baby finally. And I'm like nursing her for the first time, and holding her. And then like, yeah, but you got to go. Like, we need the bed kind of thing. And I was like,
Let's stay with that moment for just a minute. What was that like to nurse her for the first time, to put her to the breast?
oh, I mean, it was amazing, but it was not like it was with my son. Like, even she was only a
Right.
couple of weeks in the NICU, but she'd only ever had a bottle and a pacifier. So she didn't want really anything to do with breastfeeding. Like, she was like, what's this? Like, it
Right.
was weird. She wasn't like a regular baby who was like, oh, like so excited for it. Like, yeah, she was kind of like, yeah, like, what's this? And I was like, oh man. And I'm like, I need to feed this baby. Like, I just wanted so bad to do it. So I'm like, okay, let me try.
Yeah.
It was like, I was like, oh my God, this is not right. I knew it wasn't right. It didn't feel right. She didn't feel comfortable. But then I'm like, but I need to figure this out because they want me to take her home and she's got to be eating. And I'm like, okay, we have bottles and I have some breast milk. And she was also taking some formula because she was a big baby. She was a full-term baby. So she had pretty high, and she was healing from a surgery. So she had pretty high
Right.
nutritional needs. And she needed to, one of the main things with babies leaving the NICU is that they're able to eat enough. Right. They don't let the babies go home unless they are able to take in enough nutrition orally or however, in order to survive, to live. So I was like, oh my God, like, how am I going to feed this baby? And I didn't really want to give her formula. I'm being honest. I really, really wanted to breastfeed her. I wanted to nurse her. But yeah, I mean, they were just like, I had to figure something out quick. So
Yeah. Yeah. So you did both.
I did both. I did both.
You
I did both. Yeah. I did some formula. The pumping for me was always not great. I never was really too sick. I did it, but I always felt like I just like couldn't quite get enough. So I really quickly, I wanted to move away from that because I didn't like it. It didn't, I didn't have a lot of milk. I know a lot more about it now, but it just wasn't working too well. I really wanted to try to nurse her. So I worked really, really, really hard I had to, so we basically packed everything up and we got in the car and we drove home to my mom's house 5 hours she went from like a NICU bed to like,
yeah,
the second longest 5 hours of my life, driving her home. Like, is she breathing?
right.
Like, I kept with my finger under her nose or in front of her mouth. Is she breathing? Is she breathing? We stopped at a rest stop, and I'm like, the second time I nursed her was in the middle of a rest stop in Pennsylvania on the highway. And I'm like,
yeah, that's full-time mom right there. That's full-time mom.
It was wild, but she did amazing.
So how old is Viviana now?
She is 9 and a couple of months. Yeah.
Tell me about her.
Oh my gosh, she's amazing. She plays competitive soccer. She dances. She has like this fire inside of her, like this fight, this determination, this resilience, like this I don't know, like, I always say, like, this little girl was fighting for her life from the moment she was conceived.
Yeah.
And that's who she is today. Like, these NICU babies are like some of the strongest, toughest, most amazing kiddos you'll ever meet. And I have a funny story. She was 3 years old, and my son, 2 years older, she was like almost 4, 3.5, and 3 and change. And they were riding bikes, and my daughter was riding with training wheels, right? And the friend was like, "Oh, you ride a baby bike." Okay, so Vivi, she hears it. She kept riding her bike. The next day, we get up, and this is summertime, and I come out. They're like, "We want to go ride bikes," whatever, my kids, right? So I went
Yeah.
outside, and Vivi had enlisted her brother to take off her training wheels. She's like, "I'm done with this baby bike." She said, her big brother, Jose, she's like, "Take these off." And him being the way he is, because he's got, his own awesome qualities, he's like, "Oh, okay, yeah, I could take that off." 5 years old. He's like, "Yeah, I got this."
Let
He
me go
took the
get my
training wheels
toolbox.
off. Yeah, he took them off. And that little girl, not even 4 years old, starts riding her bike in my driveway with no help. I think I held on the back of the seat for a second, and she just took off riding. She's not even 4 years old. Like, it's crazy. Like,
She's
and
determined.
that's just who she is. Like,
Yeah.
she's determined, and she's pretty incredible.
She
But,
is incredible. You all were incredible too for, such a commitment and such dedication. If you were, to have to, define it, but what does hope mean to you?
oh, hope is, you know what? Hope is all I had during this time, really, for me. I mean, hope is just, always believing that, it can be okay, like that it'll be all right. Just always hanging on to like whatever little thing it is that like keeps you going. I just like, that's what got me through. As soon as I found out what happened to Vivi, I withdrew. I no more social media posts. I didn't even barely see my friends. I withdrew from everything. But like, the one thing that kept me going through this whole experience was hope. Just that hope that, that she would be okay, that we could get through this together as a family, that, that, that it could be okay, and that she could live. I just always had that hope inside of me, that faith, like just that something inside of me that just said, "You know what? Like, she's going to be okay." And I just tried to hold on to that. Like, for me, hope is huge. I'm just always trying to have hope, no matter what, no matter how much it seems like you can't keep going. Like, I can't have one more appointment. I can't have one more disappointment or one more, like, I don't know. You just have hope that if you keep going, keep putting one foot in front of the other, 1 minute at a time, that, you'll get there somehow. I don't know.
Yeah,
It's not easy though.
it's not.
The NICU life.
What would you share with some words of wisdom that you might share with someone who's in the NICU now?
Oh, I think mainly just like, take it one day at a time, one moment at a time. Don't try to get too far ahead of yourself, or, just things can change so quickly. And yeah, just try to just stay in the moment. Like whatever gives you strength, like lean into that. Um, Whatever fills you up, you gotta take care of yourself in the middle of all this. So whatever it is that like fills you, whether it be prayer or your faith. Some people like to journal or walk, if it's your friends, family, like if you meditate, if you knit, whatever it is that fills you up, they have that saying, like, you can't pour from an empty cup. And it's so true. Like, you gotta try, as hard as it is and as guilty as you may feel when you take a few minutes, to sleep that extra 5 minutes, or whatever it is, you really just take that time for yourself, and, you'll be able to be there, for your baby even more if you just, take good care of yourself. The other thing I was thinking too is, ask for help, like, people want to help. They really do. And when you have a baby but your baby's not home, your baby's in the NICU, like, people, they don't necessarily know what to do, but there are lots of things they can still do for you, and let people help you. If you have other kids, let them watch your other kids or pick them up from school. If they want to set up like a meal train for you, like, I know a lot of like moms groups or church families, like, they'll set up, they'll feed you, give you a
this is the time to
ride,
receive.
clean your house, like, they can't help with your baby, but they can help you, and they can help your family. And, I know it's hard to ask, but, let people help you, because you can't do this alone, like, nobody can do this alone. Everybody needs people to support them and be there for them. And, the NICU can be a very lonely place. But, let us help you.
Let us help you. Yeah, Adriane, this has been such a beautiful story, and I'm so, so grateful that you shared it with us. If you're out there right now, sitting by your baby's bedside, or driving back and forth to the NICU, or perhaps up in the night pumping every 3 hours like clockwork, or in one of those family meeting rooms waiting for your baby to come out of surgery, Adriane and I absolutely want you to know that you are not alone. And we look forward to sitting with you again next time. Take gentle care.